It is dotNYC. We're trying this again. Here we are. I'm Jeff Jarvis at the CUNYJ-School of Journalism, talking about the intersection of technology with journalism and advertising and finance and today fashion and everything else we can talk about in New York. So we're delighted to be here. We're still trying to figure out what the show is and experiment, and we're going to try some other odd things coming up. I've got all excited about 360 when I went out to VidCon. We'll talk about that later. And so here we are, and great show today. Two things we're going to have today. Number one, we've been trying to get Julia Samuels in here, so we'll talk about that in a second. And number two, a great graduate of our school, Jenny Avens, is going to bring in some fashionable startups. So that's what we're doing today. So, Julia Samuels, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted. So I think you were announced with your new role like days before we started doing
That's
this.
right.
We've got to get Julia here immediately. Explain what you're doing now.
So we launched an organization called TechNYC. It's at technyc.org. And what it really is a coalition, an industry coalition of tech companies here in New York City. And we're kind of focusing on the company level, the CEO level, the investor level to help push the ball on policy issues. This is how I tend to explain it to people. The organization exists for one reason, and that's to ensure that New York City is the best place to build and grow a tech company. And then it's to think about what we need to do as an industry, what we need to do as a community to push that goal. I can talk a little bit more about what I think that looks like. So this is how I think about it. I think about it like we have a toolkit. We have various things we can do to really support the tech ecosystem, the structure here in New York. The first is policy work. That's digging in on state and local policy, working with elected officials, really making sure that the laws, the regulations on the books here in New York support entrepreneurship, particularly in the tech space.
Any particular example of what's been stopping them?
Sure. Well, the thing that people like to talk about the most, I think, is what I consider the regulatory whack-a-mole. And that's what's made a lot of news lately. But it's really just a small part of it. But that's, again, what's been in the news. So Airbnb, ride sharing, drones, all that stuff. And I think it's important as you think about this to understand why one of these small areas might matter for the larger industry. From our perspective, we don't represent any single company. Of course, we're a nonprofit organization. But we do think it's important that New York City, that New York State sends the right message that says, bring your new business model here.
It'll be okay.
And I think this is such an important point. It's not that it won't be regulated. It's not that we think regulation is bad. It's not that this is the Wild West. But it is to say, come here, we'll figure out a way forward.
Right. You can have a collaborative discussion,
That's
discussion, and we won't be harassing you at every step.
And I think I'm so excited I used to live in the Bay Area. I've done this in San Francisco. I've done a lot of this in DC at the federal level. And I'm so much more excited about this work here in New York because, well, there's so many reasons. But I think when you think about what these comprehensive solutions look like, what these compromises might look like, here we're on top of each other. We share the same infrastructure. We're literally we're sardines. We're not literally sardines, but we're really, really right on top of each other. And so we have to figure it out.
Right. So you're making your list. One was for regulatory.
Regulatory. And there's stuff around privacy, stuff around access to talent, so education, computer science. CUNY has this amazing partnership with the city about increasing visas for entrepreneurs. We're huge supporters of that effort. Diversity and inclusivity. We want to make sure, essentially what we want to do is make sure that it's easy to build and grow your companies here. But we also want to make sure that we're supporting all of New York and that the good jobs that these companies create are available to all New Yorkers. Big task, but important. Right. So that's the kind of policy piece. I really think of that as the bread and butter of this work. Also, I'm a tech policy wonk, so this is the part that
You came from doing God's work at EFF.
I did do that.
Yes.
My job title there actually was the Mark Cuban Chair to Eliminate Stupid Patents. So I love this. I love this work. The second tool, I guess, is this idea of being a champion for New York City as a tech and innovation hub. It's almost like being a cheerleader, though that sounds a little trite. I don't mean it trite at all. Reminding people what is so great about building companies in New York. And the things that are so great that make New York unique, which is quite hard to say, New York unique, are New York is the center of the universe for so many industries. So you're going to have some fashion startups on today, a little bit later, right? If you are building a startup, a technology company in the fashion space, why would you want to build it anywhere but New York City? Same for real estate, fintech, we've already pretty much seen that here.
Right.
Advertising, media, you can rattle it off. Pretty much any industry, we think. You've got the center of gravity, like I said, is here. So you should have capital, you should have mentorship, expertise, talent. Because what you're going to see, I think, is that it's a trend we're already seeing. More and more of the successful tech companies going forward aren't going to be these pure tech tools, these pure tech plays. They're going to be companies that are powered by technology in these industries that already exist here. So helping celebrate that. And also the thing, too, that I hope we get to spend some time talking about our organization is really celebrating some of these other things that make New York great. The arts scene, the cultural institutions we have. There are for a long time, I think that people who worked in technology felt like if you wanted to do this work, you had to go to the Bay Area.
Well, when I talk to people in the Bay Area, they say that if software, one major investor there said, if software can solve it, then that's what we do, and that's where you have to be.
That's right. I don't think that's as true. I came from the Bay Area.
Right.
Not originally, but I moved out there to work at EFF. And I think for a long time, that was true to some extent, that if you really wanted to be in tech, you went there. It's not true anymore. It's not to say the Bay Area isn't amazing. It's not one versus two, but it's...
We like it, yeah.
Everyone...
So I just came from Los Angeles, and I got to say, it is a soulless place. It just drove me nuts. But
that's because you're a New Yorker, right?
I am
you
now.
Want to be in New York.
I used to be a Californian. I used to think that San Francisco was the greatest place on earth. Then I made the mistake of moving here, I thought. Then I said, no, this is my home. But there was that time when I thought it was a mistake to come here. I said, I'll take anywhere in California. I'll even take LA. And sorry about that.
And now you're here, though.
Then I went back out to LA last week, and Jesus, it just drives me nuts. Yeah, I'm a New Yorker. Damn it.
And now you can do tech from here.
Yes.
And the last piece is to increase the civic and philanthropic engagement of our tech industry. So I think,
good.
One of the themes I think we'll keep revisiting is that as the tech industry in New York has become a bigger part of the whole economic pie, as it's become a more mature industry, it's time that we have a seat at the table, that we act, I don't want to say act like grown-ups because it wasn't that we weren't before.
Responsibly.
But, but play the role of a major industry in a major city like New York.
Fred Wilson was one of the key...
Fred Wilson and Tim Armstrong from AOL are our board co-chairs.
Right.
Really drove, both of them have been amazing.
I mean, Fred's been the godfather of New York tech through the years.
That's right.
He's also been blunt, and I mean, I learned a lot of lessons about blogging from Fred. His openness, his bluntness about things. And so I saw in one of the pieces written about you that Fred, self-confession, said, and I've heard this discussion before, that one of the problems with New York is we just haven't had the exits. Is that the right scale to judge us by when it comes to technology? Or because we believe that New York's about the intersection of technology and other areas, should we judge our success instead about how technology enhances and enriches other industries and other fields?
I think the latter. I don't think judging by exits is meaningful. People do it. It's a really easy way to shorthand success of an industry. And actually, we have had more exits, I think, than people tend to talk about. Etsy, Shutterstock, there are big New York companies that have been really successful. But I think what you're talking about, how technology fuels everything else, we've created more than 300,000 technology jobs in New York City. Those were 300,000, right? Those are really good jobs that didn't exist before. That, to me, is the success. That's the marker. And I'll also say that because New York is so much more diverse, because it's more diverse by industry, because we have public transportation that brings people in from affordable places to live, because of all of these things, I think that it's a very durable economic model for technology here in a way that might not be the case everywhere.
Yeah, I started a program here in entrepreneurial journalism at CUNY. I believe in entrepreneurship. I believe in starting new companies. But let me just play devil's advocate myself for a second here. Maybe there's just enough startups. Maybe we've just kind of gone crazy with that. And I don't really mean that, obviously. But we also see in our newspaper industry is suffering terribly out of a lack of innovation. I think the advertising industry is, because nobody wants to argue with the guy with the checkbook, they're not innovating sufficiently. and go through the finance needs a lot of help in rethinking what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe the role of New York is to put technology inside and innovation inside all of those industries.
So I think I don't entirely disagree with that position, but to the extent you're going to do that successfully, you need the startups.
Okay.
I think the way the ecosystem works, that a lot of the larger companies, even the ones who really do want to be innovative and really do want to reinvent themselves, it's hard. There's inertia, they're big, right? And you'll find exceptions to this and totally support that. And to the extent a company can do that, I am 100% all for it and want to be supportive any way I can. But for a lot of companies, it's really difficult and really slow. So what you often see, of course, is this idea of startups creating the technology and then the big firms either buying the startup, doing what's called an acqui-hire, maybe buying the talent, or even just being a customer to the startup. So what you want is to create this infrastructure, this kind of culture here in New York that incentivizes those startups to build the tools that the big company needs, but to do that in a way that they're all getting along.
Yeah, and we want to say and not but, and not or. However, but, what's needed in a lot of industries is utter disruption.
Well, and I mean, to some extent, you have seen that happening in your own industry, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually, I should say, that's my background. And in fact, when I was in undergrad, I had an internship one summer in Knoxville, Tennessee for Scripps Howard. And we were working to put content in the late 90s, a year that shall remain nameless, working to put content online. So this intersection is something I've always been probably the most interested in and drove my interest in a lot of these other areas as well. Because I think what becomes so difficult, and this is pretty elementary, and I'm sure most people listening have thought about this already, but you want to preserve jobs, you want to preserve what we really like about certain industries, but technology moves fast. And old business models can't stop it, and laws can't stop it. So what we want to do, and what TechNYC exists to do, is to say, okay, let's take this, let's take what we think technology can do, and let's try and be the oil, essentially, the oil and the cogs that smoothly, or helps that transition be as smooth as possible. And how I come at this work, why I care about this work, and this sounds so corny, and it is totally true. I am one of those people that fundamentally believes in the power of technology to make the world better. I think you can talk about flattening society. I think you can talk about access to information, and I think people, they're like, whatever, we don't want to hear that anymore, but I believe it. I fundamentally believe it, if we get it right.
Right, and I agree, and I get smashed for it all the time. Technological determinist and over optimist, but we have choices. We can screw it up. We can use technology badly, but I think technology gives us opportunities that we didn't have. So let me now get your advice about our own students here.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Kaplan, my colleague here, runs the program in entrepreneurial journalism, and we get about 15 to 20 students every spring, and they have great ideas. But here's the problem I haven't been able to solve. There's a couple problems. One is that, and they're related. One is that we can take the idea so far. Jenny Abrams is going to be on next, has a great idea. She went and got a job, which is fine, which is great. She's doing really well. That's one thing that happens. But they leave the program smarter about the business of journalism. So I'm delighted with that. That's a huge outcome on its own. But for those who really do want to start their own businesses, they can get through that horrible word ideation here in the process of thinking through their idea and their business. What they don't have is a team, and they don't have a prototype, and they don't have, thus, the ability to get money.
Right.
When we started the program, I had $50,000 a year to give to the businesses, which sounded great, but it was like putting a hothouse orchid on 40th Street, and with one drop of water and saying, good luck, kid. We didn't think it through enough. So now we work a lot more, and Jeremy has mentors coming in. We work more on prototyping. But the problem for everybody who's in an allied field, the first thing you're going to hear is, I can't find a technologist. I can't find anybody who wants to work with us. I can't get that team together to become credible, to make the prototype, to go get the funding. And yes, we have Cornell coming in, and CUNY has a lot of good technology, and Columbia is doing good work there, but they do get dragged off to the Googles of the world, which, God bless it, has huge employment here, and Facebook as well. How do we solve that problem in these allied fields where they are not fundamentally technology companies? So fundamentally, I want our students to start journalism and media companies and service companies, but they're not technologists. How do we get them together with a team, teach them how to work with a team, so they can then make something and get money?
So there are two answers, and I think one is structural, one is kind of a policy top-down answer, and you already alluded to that, and that's by increasing education opportunities. But that's not going to be for this semester's team or next semester's team, right? But that is something that TechNYC is going to work on, and I talked a little bit about that. This ensuring that there's access to technical education, computer science in schools, increasing the number of people here who have technological backgrounds. But again, that's a process.
Right.
So in the short term, what do we do? Well, first of all, I don't know what the plan exactly is with the visa plan. Again, I talked about this already too. The partnership CUNY has with the city here to bring in extra visas. That actually might be an outlet.
That's true. And I don't want to go into cultural stereotypes, but we've had some wonderful students from India. Like, everybody in India is wonderful, but we've had some wonderful students from India. And the funny thing is, when we get to that discussion about you need technology, inevitably, all the students said, I have a cousin. So it's good to have more cousins we can bring in. Yeah,
it's good to, and they're talking about 80 visas. I don't know how many students are in your program.
15.
So listen, there's a there. I think there's also a lot of opportunity, and again, this is a conversation that we should continue offline. Everyone can be part of it, though. There are a lot of the companies in New York really do want to dig in. They want to dig in with what's happening in the city. They want the employees at the companies and the employees themselves want to be part of that. And so even if you can't find a full-time hire for a lot of these people, you might be able to find someone who's an engineer at a big New York company. Maybe it's a Google or an AOL or even a more mid-sized company like a Kickstarter who might believe in the project, who might be able to plug in. Because talent is a huge problem. And I think if you were to poll all the tech companies in New York, and we did do this actually, and we're still sifting through the data, so next time I'll come back I'll have some more, I hope. But I think one of the top, if not the top, roadblock for a lot of these companies is technical talent. So to the extent you're teaching them what it's really like to build a tech company, that's a real problem that you're going to find when you get out.
And so I see more and more, I haven't, no one's taken me up on this yet, but I would argue to students they should consider starting a new media company, for example, entirely on Facebook. Let Facebook handle the technology, distribution, production, advertising, sales, everything, and do what you do, serve a community well. Nobody's bid for that yet. And in the media business, they'll look at that as if, danger, they're going to pull right up with this. But how do we, I guess that's part of what you can facilitate is friendlier relationships. What I concentrate a lot of my time on these days is peace in the kingdom between platforms and publishers, because they've been at war and it's not productive. And I talked with a big publisher 2 weeks ago, and they said, we're going to fight Google. And I said, you're a fly on the elephant's butt. They don't even see you. And so getting more cooperation and more trust among the big companies and these other allied fields, I think is something that you can do that'll be very important.
And listen, for a lot of those older, bigger companies as well, they have a really hard time getting technical talent. Probably significantly harder than...
who the hell wants to work for a dinosaur?
That's right.
Yeah.
When you can go work for Google or Facebook or a small startup. I mean, it's just... This problem is acutely felt and is one of, I think, the biggest problems.
So part of what you're saying, what we need is an oversupply of tech talent?
I mean, I would love an oversupply.
We need a competitive
but I think
marketplace.
the other thing that is important to think about here is we tend to talk about tech talent as this kind of monolithic, tech talent is tech talent. But there's really a pretty wide spectrum of what tech talent looks like, right? You can have a computer science degree and be really thinking kind of on the high ends of how you structure whole systems. And then there's the ability to code. And then there's everything in between, right? So the ability to build a pretty simple website is in a lot of ways, I think, what we traditionally think of as vocational. Right?
Yeah.
Good job, but you don't need to be kind of this incredibly highly educated algorithmic thinker.
To plug one of our companies from this program, Otto started a company called Skill Crush, which aims to primarily train women, just because she believes that women learning in a bro culture is not necessarily always the best way to learn, but it's not limited to women. That's always a problem in her positioning. But she came in and had to learn in circumstances she didn't like very much, and she fixes that. And yes, she's getting people who can create a new career to make websites.
That's right.
To do that at that level.
We have we've got a couple member companies who are working in this space, and one of them, I'm going to take the example he used. So thanks, Jeremy. What he said is a lot of times you'll teach someone how to let's say build a website, how to code, and that person might go get a job that is no different than the job they would have gotten before, but they have this added skill, which is to say, hire me to run the front office at your company. I'll do what I would have done before, but now I can also help with your website.
Right.
And that is an added skill set. So you're even talking about, even if this person is not going to all of a sudden get a top engineer job at Google, and that's okay. Because eventually we really believe that these technical skills, this spectrum of technical skills, is going to be top down and bottom up.
Yeah, it's way easier. We did some work here on looking at the skills needed in journalism and media, and came up with the idea. We started a new thing here at CUNY called CUNYJ Plus for professional development around the idea that you need a superpower. Yeah. Right? If your added power is I can build a website, your added power is I can be the social person, your added power is I can do data journalism, and so on and so on.
Right.
Then you have new opportunities in your career, which would lead us as an educational institution to say, should we be going for degrees or should we be going for certification? Things like Udacity's nano degrees,
right,
I think are really powerful.
I think so too. You add them on, right? You add them on. I think that, and a lot of this too is experimentation. And I hope, this is what I worry about structurally though. I think that all the stuff we're talking about is kind of either training or retraining the existing workforce. The people who are already in their 20s to 60s, right? That's crucial in the short term. But what I really worry about is that as a society, as a country, as a state, and as a city, we are also not doing a very good job at fixing the what comes after. And that should be the easier part, right? It should be obvious, it should be elemental that we're teaching today's kids these skills. Yes. And we're actually not even doing that.
No, we're not.
And that part just feels, people are trying. And there are great efforts here in New York. The administration has dug in this public-private partnership called CS for All. This isn't me complaining that no one's getting it. It's hard, and it's really actually the part that's the hardest about a lot of this is finding the teachers who can teach the skills.
Yes, but there too, we should find the technology can make it easier because we can scale a lot better. And I'm not saying technology solves it all. At VidCon, I saw some educators talking about video and YouTube and education.
Yeah.
And one of them quoted a whole bunch of teachers that had a meeting out there and said that the fear was that YouTube would become the new teacher, and no, it's the new textbook. And I like that. I think that's the way to look at it. There are more scalable, easier ways to teach people however they want to learn what the skills are. I think part of what we have to do is to do a better job of expressing those skills, so that you can say, I'm a this, and I can get a job doing that, and figure out where that goes.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is something we're going to be spending a lot of time working on. Again, both at the shorter term level, how do we, to answer your specific question, how do we help fill those holes next week, next year, but also longer term, because the longer term is also how you address, I think if you get it right, how you address a lot of the society's structural problems that go beyond technology. And again, this might be Pollyanna, but I think it's totally true that if you can teach these skills to people who maybe come from parts of the city, parts of the state that they feel like it's hard to move up, then you can teach the skill, and we just have to do it.
That's what a state educational institution, a city educational institution.
I'm a graduate from a state educational institution, so I fundamentally appreciate that.
So how many companies are now involved? What are some of the big names?
So we have a kind of founding member level, and the founding members are Google, Facebook, AOL, Bloomberg, Union Square Ventures. It's on our website, but we've got almost 300 companies listed on the website now, and we've got I think another 100 that we're getting ready to list. And you'll see, if you guys go to technyc.org, you'll see that it really runs the gamut from small company to big company, and it was really important to us to ensure that we had companies in all of the major verticals. So we've got fintech companies, we've got advertising companies, we've got fashion companies, we've got, I hope, some journalism companies. And listen, we just launched about 6 weeks ago, so we're still digging in, we're still trying to reach out to all of the members to really understand what their issues are, what kinds of things they care about. And I think part of what's been funny for me is we're a startup ourselves, and I hadn't really thought of that. I've been working with startups and tech companies for so many years. I've run other organizations. I've just been doing this for a long time. And then one morning a couple weeks ago, I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I'm a founder. This is crazy. What was I thinking?
Here at CUNY, here at the Journalism School, we're 10 years old, going into our 10th year now, and our founding dean, Steve Shepard, would have that same headache. And I would say to him, and Sarah Bartlett, who succeeded him as dean, would say to him, we're a startup. And the beauty of it is, to some extent it was an excuse for our growing pains, that's true. But the important part is to hold on to that.
Yeah, I think so.
To stay the startup. We pride ourselves here on changing all the time, and we don't always change as much as we should. We have to remind ourselves constantly that this is a changing world, and what a startup means is that you're nimble.
That's right.
All.
That's right, and it's been so. Yes, well, I think that part's so important, especially because I do so much work with institutions like Congress, City Council, these institutions that are the polar opposite, where iteration is virtually impossible.
Right. Well, and not to get too political, but I think if we look at the age of Brexit and Trump, we see a pressure on them to change as well, and they don't know what to do with it.
That's right. I think that's right.
So just ending here, I want to go back to your EFF role for
Yeah.
a second. Since, as I say, doing Electronic Frontier Foundation's work is very important, and I agree with them on 99% of what they do. Are you optimistic on the policy side of things like net neutrality and freedom of speech and other issues around technology?
I'm overall optimistic. I'm overall optimistic because I believe that technology kind of will bend toward the right thing. Well, listen, net neutrality is in pretty good shape right now.
Yeah.
So to take that one, that's a really good example because, and I worked really hard on net neutrality, I was at EFF and then I ran another organization called Engine that was kind of one of the key players in that as well. And net neutrality is something that I think people thought there was no way for a long time. This is not going to happen. We're not going to get.
Titans will stop it.
They'll stop it. Politics will make it too hard. And guess what? It happened. And the court recently upheld the FCC's decision to reclassify the internet essentially as a utility, which no one wants to say because I think everyone's afraid. Oh, the politics. Like, who cares? It's great. I think the internet is fundamentally a utility. It should be a utility. And it might go to the Supreme Court, but I don't even think that's going to go to the Supreme Court. So that's an example of where we got to the right place. Free speech on the internet, I mean, this is something I actually have been working on since before I went to law school. I worked at a nonprofit here in New York called Media Coalition in 2001 and 2002. So I've been thinking about these issues for a very long time, and it's not perfect. We have a lot of work to do, but there are so many smart people and a lot of wonderful organizations being led by EFF, I think, who are working really hard on this. And if you believe in those people and you believe that smart people who understand technology will be there fighting those fights, and if you believe in technology, I think you have to believe we'll end up on the right side.
Yeah, I agree. Julie, thank you
That was
so
my
much.
pleasure.
I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
we got to
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Let's stay in touch.
I would love it. Thank
Good,
you so
thanks.
much.
All right, great.
Okay.